Welcome to the Vintage Ballers podcast. I'm your host, Brad Carino. And on today's episode, we have Kendall Phills joining the show. Kendall is the widow of former NBA star Bobby Phills, who passed away tragically in a car accident in January of 2000. Kendall is currently a real estate agent in the Charlotte, North Carolina area and also runs her own charity foundation. So without further ado, please welcome Kendall Phills. Yeah, this is great to talk to you. And I really appreciate you doing this and coming on the show. It's kind of surreal talking to you in some ways because I'm from Cleveland. I still live in Cleveland.
No way. What part?
So I live in Westlake, about 20 minutes west.
3691 Lexington Court, Westlake,
No
Ohio.
way. No way.
I still remember my address.
God.
How about that?
Wow.
Off of Crocker, was it
Crocker?
Yeah,
I live right by Crocker. It's funny because there's a big complex here called Crocker Park now, which is like a huge mall area. And it definitely wasn't there when you lived there. Yeah, it was a field back then. It's crazy how much it's changed. So, because I actually moved away for a while. I was in California for a little bit, and then I lived out about an hour from here, and then moved back here. And it's changed a lot in the last like 20 years. But I mean, Kendall, I have so many memories of. I'm a huge Cleveland sports fan, especially the Cavs. And me and my friends and my family, and I mean everybody. When I told them you're going to be on the show, I mean everyone remembers Bobby. There's not a person here that watched sports that doesn't remember him. And the first thing people talk about is how good of a defender he was against Jordan, especially. And we'll get into all that. But there are so many, it's amazing how Cleveland sports fans don't forget that kind of stuff. And he was one of those guys that you don't forget because, number one, his physique, he was built like, I mean, back then in the NBA, it was just a different type of player. It was a tough mind. It was a physical game, and Bobby was built perfectly for that. And just his demeanor, he was very low key, and just everyone here loved him. And he kind of came from, I mean, he wasn't really highly touted out of college, and he ended up being one of the better role players in the NBA. So again, we'll get into all that, but I have so many memories of watching him as a kid. I was probably 10 years old back in those days, and I remember all those teams.
Wow.
Oh, Kendall, I have so many memories of going to games with my dad at the old Richfield Coliseum, and then of course the Gund Arena. So yeah, we'll get into all that. Trust me. But so having you on is a treat for me because, again, there's so many people from Cleveland that asked me when I told them I was having you on. They're like, oh, my God, I can't wait to watch this. So I definitely appreciate you joining the show.
Thanks for having me. I am just honored to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I want to get started, Kendall, and I want to actually take it back to your youth. And where did you grow up and how did you meet Bobby? And tell us all about that.
So I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and so was Bobby. He lived in Tuskegee, Alabama, and his dad took a job at Southern University, which is the same college we finished from. And I learned that we were going to have a new guy at Southern Lab, which is the high school we went to. So his family moved to Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But the twist was he moved directly across the street from me in the same subdivision. So literally that's how we started dating. I was in 10th grade. He was a senior. And it was a beautiful love affair.
I was going to say, what was it, love at first sight, or was it, how did you guys first connect?
Now, Brad, he had an old girlfriend at first.
I love it. All those little high school flings. I love it.
But we took a class together because with electives, upperclassmen could take classes with lowerclassmen. And we took, I think it was civics. And the teacher was the high school basketball coach, Coach Hugh Wallace. And he knew I had a crush on Bobby. You could just tell. I would just stare at the guy in class. And one day the coach sent Bobby down to his office because he had favor because he was a basketball player. And Bobby could go do other homework in the coach's office. And one day Bobby was in the office when he was supposed to be in class, and the coach sent me to his office to get something, knowing he was totally setting everything up. It was a kiss, Brad, and the rest is history.
No kidding. That's a great story. I mean, that truly is like young love it's like that doesn't happen very often.
It does not.
And when you look back at that now, I mean, especially like that you guys were together for so long, is it something, I mean, could you imagine having any kind of, like, when you look back at that part of your life, is there any regrets that you didn't date more? Or are you happy exactly how it turned out?
I couldn't be more happier than how it turned out. Bobby was my first love, and I admired him. I looked up to him, and envied him in so many different ways. You know, he was an academic scholar. I was mediocre. So, I mean, I just emulated him. And, you know, I knew that he was going to be my husband. And I told him if we ever got married, it was going to be till death do us part.
Wow. I mean,
But maybe I shouldn't have said that so much, but I reminded him to death do us part.
so at that time, like, so he was a senior, you're a sophomore, and then he goes off to Southern. And it's funny you say that because I had a guy on who follows my NBA page on Instagram actually talk. Well, I post about Bobby, several times a year typically. And someone years ago commented how they played against him at Southern. They went to some, I don't know what college you went to, I can't remember, but he said, yeah, I played against. I can't remember I wish I knew what college the guy said he went to, but he said he guarded him. And he's like, I remember Bobby very well. Of course, he followed his NBA career, but it was interesting that it's so the connections I've made just running this page and having this podcast and all the different people that know each other. And it's incredible, but it's funny having him talk about that. And, I have many fans who will come back and say things like that, or I guarded this guy, or I played against him in college. So when you look back at those days, did you know Bobby, as far as his basketball career, Kendall, did you foresee him getting to the point where he was in the NBA?
I did not. He didn't either. Bobby wanted to be a veterinarian.
Really?
And yes, he did. And it wasn't until his junior year he was leading the nation in 3-point scoring. And his coach told him, hey, you might have a shot at the NBA. He was getting recognition with the NBA scouts. And a lot of people criticized Bobby because he was a shooting guard. However, he couldn't dribble. And so that was his big weakness. And he wanted to be more proficient in the 3-point shooting. And so that man worked harder than anybody I know to change his game, to work on his dribbling, and to succeed. So it wasn't even in his forte to become an NBA player. He wanted to be a doctor. And when things shifted, he said he was going to seize the moment and opportunity.
Wow, I did not know that. And it's interesting because his game, how he played his game, Kendall, would fit perfectly in today's game. He's a great defender and he can shoot the three. And that's exactly what today's
Oh,
game is.
yes.
He would have been
Oh,
the
yes.
ideal shooting guard for today because you don't even need to dribble that much as a shooting guard today. Just if you can shoot the three and defend the other guy, you're good. And that's what he did.
I often try to imagine how life would be how life would be if he were still here, especially if he could have played his entire career, if he could have finished his 7-year contract with the Charlotte Hornets. I could just imagine him saying, man, these guys so soft now. Whoever, heard of guys taking days off, man, we ain't do that now time. So I could just hear him now, but I know he was going to have a long career. He even said, you know what? As long as I could get on that floor and encourage the young rookies coming in and just pour into them things that the vets, poured into him, he said he'll take a meal ticket and sit on anybody's bench.
I love it. And what year he was in? What year 3 of a 7-year contract? Or
it was his second year.
Second year, okay. Because I remember, I mean, obviously when he was here in Cleveland, we got him in '92. I remember that, and we had because that was back in like the Price, Doherty, Craig Elo, Larry Nance, all those guys, and they were,
Yes.
they were here for about 6-7 years before then, and could never really get over the hump. But Bobby was here for those couple of seasons where they played MJ, of course, and they lost in the playoffs. But they got kind of far the one year. Then they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. So he got to experience a taste of that right away and kind of see playoff basketball. And really, Bobby made the playoffs, I think, almost every year of his career, except for maybe one, because last year when he was with Cleveland, they missed it in '97 by one game. They lost the last game of the season. But besides that, he had made it pretty much every year of his career, which is incredible. Not many players can say that. And it's a shame he never really got a taste of the finals or could get to that level because it would have been fun seeing him, what he could have done. And I remember, Kendall, he was one of the few guys in the league. Not that anybody could guard MJ because nobody, he's unstoppable. But Bobby, I'll tell you what, there's still guys who will talk about how Bobby is one of the few players that can kind of contain MJ. And in one game here, I believe he held him to 19 points, I believe. It was like mid-90s. I'll never forget watching that. Bobby, I mean, think about that. I mean, you're talking about arguably the greatest player of all time, and Bobby is one of the few guys that can actually defend him fairly well. So did you remember that? And what did Bobby ever talk to you about that?
Of course, I remember oh so well. Fun story. Bobby went to Chicago for, I guess it was the rookies camp that took place in Chicago, and they go in Michael Jordan's locker, and Mike still has his shoes, his workout paraphernalia, his practice paraphernalia, and Bobby took 2 pair of MJ's practice shorts. And he wore those shorts underneath his game shorts, underneath his suits. He had those red and black practice shorts on. And so I buried him
Did you in those?
in those practice shorts. I mean, you couldn't even see Chicago Bulls anymore because it had faded the number of times I watched it. But Michael, as we all know, was a great and awesome player. And I remember Bobby saying Michael Jordan brings out everybody's A game. So it was a special routine when they played the Chicago Bulls. You know, he getting his rest. Don't touch me, Kendall. I got MJ. And he had goals, and he never wanted to see that winning shot in his face over and over again. So, they called him the Jordan stopper. And Michael Jordan even gave him his props several times, on how great of a defender Bobby was. And he took pride in defending. So, because that's a hard job to score offensively and then still have to give your best on defense. That takes a lot out of you.
Oh, no question about it. And it's got to be cool, even for your kids to look back. I know they didn't get to see MJ in his prime, because they weren't even born, but to know that one of the greatest athletes of all time, not just in basketball, of all time, their father was one of the best guys at guarding him. I mean, that doesn't, that's something you can always talk about for the rest of your life.
My son has a picture of his dad guarding Michael Jordan in his room, and it's been there ever since he was a little boy, 3 years old. I put this beautiful picture in his room. My son took that picture down and replaced it with his Yale number 13 jersey. Brad, I went off. He put the picture back up, but he still hung up his Yale jersey in a different spot.
Oh, that is great. That is great. Yeah, it's just like, again, there's so many things I remember about Bobby, but that was one of the things that everyone knew back then. And even now, I still hear analysts when they talk about people who guarded MJ well, they always bring up Bobby. Bobby Phills is one of the few guys that can because he was strong enough, yes. and he was deceivingly quick, and he was smart, and he was agile. I mean, he could do everything a defender could do against MJ. And again, no one can completely stop MJ, but exactly. I mean, I'll tell you what, though, he did pretty darn well some of those games. I mean, 19 points, the whole MJ to 19 points, that doesn't happen very often.
Remarkable. It's remarkable.
It really is. So when you look back now, take us back to, the college years, and when did you guys get married, and how did all that go about?
Well, Bobby's 2 years older than I am. And so it's a lot of times I was supposed to be in high school, and I would crawl under this fence so I could hang out on college, so I could be a college kid. But I never missed any of his games. It was a fun times for us. And I just saw his game grow and continue to grow throughout his collegiate career. He started his freshman year playing behind Avery Johnson, who played in the NBA, as you know.
Yeah, I know Avery. Yeah, no kidding.
His freshman year, he couldn't get any playing time. And so he asked his coach at the time, Ben Jobe, hey, what can I do to play this game? And Ben Jobe told him, shoot the ball, and shoot the ball when I say don't shoot the ball. And so Bobby played center in high school. So he had a big transition. Our high school was located on our college campus. And because we were really close with the high school coach, he would spend hours working on his 3-point shot. And he got better and better and better. And so his sophomore year, he wanted to show Coach Jobe that, he was more than just a scholar. He was an athlete as well. And he did just that. So he went on. His junior year, we realized that, okay, hey, he's like, I have a chance. I might can make it to the NBA. And, he had my support 100%. He was drafted in 91 with the Milwaukee Bucks. And he was waived, went overseas to Madrid, Spain. And this was the first time in his basketball career, a coach told him he didn't like his game. And so that was devastating to him. And I remember him calling me on the phone, and he was like, yo, I have to make a decision. Should I keep, pursuing my dream? I was like, of course. He came back, his agent got him a shot with the Cleveland Cavaliers. He signed a 10-day contract. I'll never forget. They called him in. Wayne Emery called him in and let him know that they were going to waive him, and he had a choice. He could either go his way and pursue something else, or just kind of wait it out. He waited it out, and two players went down. It was Chris Mills and Terrell Brandon. I can't remember exactly what happened, but Bobby got his chance. They activated him from the injury reserve. He played against the Orlando Magic at the time, came off the bench and scored 17 points. It was on after that.
I love it.
Yes.
It's funny because again, we talked about that team he was on back then was loaded. Really, I mean, Terrell Brandon was an all-star eventually, and of course, he played alongside Bobby for years. So
Mark Price.
and Mark Price, of course, and Doherty and Nance and Elo and Hot Rod Williams.
Yeah.
I mean, you had that team was loaded with talent and all-star talent. So that wasn't easy to make that team, and not only to catch on to that team, but then get minutes on that team. That showed you Bobby's work ethic and what he had to do to get there.
You're right. And it was sad they disassembled the team. I mean, of course, we couldn't get past the Chicago Bulls, but come on, they won 4 years in a row.
Yeah.
So that it was just their time. We got beat by the best team in the NBA. So
exactly. If it wasn't for the Bulls, we would have made a finals probably once or twice. So it is what it is. And nobody in that era got past Chicago. So
that's true.
and I look back at that era and I'm thinking, like, do you remember the old Richfield Coliseum, because that's been gone for years now. Do you remember going to those games? And it was kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it was kind of funny. Even here, it was kind of because it was real loud, and it was just a really unique atmosphere, even though it was a very bizarre arena because it was not in a city at all. It was in the middle of like a field almost.
In the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. It really was.
I was actually in college when they played in that Coliseum. So I remember we got engaged to get married in 1992, and I would go to the games, and I mean, all the wives and the girlfriends showed me so much love. And it was just a new experience for me because I was born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana as well. And snow was foreign to us. So it was an awesome experience because in Cleveland, you had, all the, professional sports. You had the Indians, the Browns, you had, the Cavs, you had all seasons, summer, spring, winter, fall. So I loved Cleveland, Ohio.
Well, we appreciate that. And it's funny, a lot of people here, again, that's Cleveland, I think, kind of gets a bad rap nationally for some different reasons. And it's like, I think it depends on what you like and what your tastes are. If you like warm weather, of course, you're going to like California or Arizona or Florida. But Cleveland, like you said, all 4 seasons. And I think just the people here are more, it's a very genuine, like a lot of genuine people here. It's it's kind of like that Midwest culture. It's kind of like the South in some ways, where it's more just down to earth and genuine. So I think with someone like Bobby, Cleveland fans love guys like Bobby who kind of come out of nowhere, aren't necessarily highly touted, and they work their asses off to get to where they got to, and then they become a staple of the city and the team. And for Bobby, again, he was one of those guys that, to this day, there's not one of my friends who watched the Cavs back in the 90s that doesn't remember Bobby, not one. And my brother was a huge fan. My brother was a very good player himself, actually, in college and high school. And we talked about Bobby when you're going to be on the show. He's like, oh my God, of course. I mean, who doesn't remember Bobby? So for Cleveland fans, it's special, especially, what happened to him. Obviously, it's kind of his legacy now. It's like, we always want to know what would have happened, what would his career have been like. And that's why we'll get into that in a second. But, for us in Cleveland, we appreciate you mentioning that. And I'm glad you enjoyed your time here because we really enjoyed having Bobby here.
Oh man, I was sad the day I knew that he was going to get traded. I think Mike Fratello was the coach then. Mm-hmm. I had already picked out my dream house. We lived in a condo, and I remember picking out my dream house, and it was a mansion. And he was like, "Never fall in love with the city. This is a business." And I hated to hear those words. So yeah. I was sad to leave Cleveland, but new beginnings are a great experience.
No question. And Charlotte's a great city as well. And going down there, take us actually I want to take you to the year before, the couple years before, because the team with like Chris Mills and Tyrone Hill and Michael Cage and Terrell Brandon, all those guys, it was Bobby Sura. There's a lot of, it was kind of a transition phase from the Price Doherty era, which was really a dominant era for Cavs basketball for a while, into this phase of kind of newer guys. I mean, Terrell was ascending, Bobby was ascending, all these younger players coming up. So when you're going through that transition phase from the Price Doherty team with Nance and all those guys to the, Tyrone Hill, Michael Cage, Terrell Brandon, Chris Mills, those guys, what was that transition like for you and Bobby, and what was it like for Bobby, especially as a player, going from the older veteran guys to really a new younger team?
Oh man, you get so used to your teammates, and they were more like brothers, to be honest. Um, him and John Battle, Hot Rod Williams, the bond that they formed off the court was huge. Our families became really close, so we were always sad to kind of see them get traded and go their separate ways. And he embraced the new kids because he enjoyed to see the talent come along. Sometimes the guys get older. Mark wasn't as, that first step becomes a little slower.
Yep.
So when you get, guards like Bobby Sora and even Terrell Brandon to replace them, you know, he was kind of excited to see some of the changes take place.
Yep. And a guy, I think John Amici was on that team. Danielle Marshall. There's a bunch of different guys in that era, but it was a
Oh yeah,
really
Donnie Marshall.
Donnie Marshall. Yeah, yeah.
Very close friend. I love Donnie Marshall. Shout out to Donnie if you're listening to
Shout out to
this.
Donnie. Yep.
We love you, Donnie.
I remember all those guys just like it was yesterday. It's so crazy to think about all those names, but you know, at that time, again, it was a transition phase for the Cavaliers and Bobby, and then of course, like you said, he gets traded and he's on the Hornets, and a couple years later. So, and that team, it's interesting that he went to Charlotte because I actually had Anthony Mason's son, Antoine Mason, on this show, and I know he played with Anthony for a couple
Oh
years.
my
So,
gosh,
yep,
that's right.
yep. And Antoine's a great kid, and it
He
was
is.
it was fun talking about, of course, the late Anthony Mason, and it's sad that some of these guys are not here anymore because there's such a big impact on so many people. But that team had Vlade Divac and Bobby and Anthony Mason. It was a really fun team to watch. What
Glenn
was
Rice.
Oh yeah, Glenn Rice. I mean, how can I forget Glenn? I mean, it was really a talented team and really an ascending team. And and I think they played. I believe you guys played the Bulls actually in '98 in the first or second round. BJ Armstrong was on that team with you guys,
Mhm.
and yep,
Yep.
and you had it was an interesting series. So, what are your memories of that whole little era in Charlotte, and what was it like moving down there and and moving to Charlotte, the city?
I fell in love with Charlotte the first time George Shin sent his private jet to pick us up, and we were coming in, and all I could see was greenery. And I fell in love with the city. I love the purple and teal colors. So I was like, hey, this is our team. The only problem he had was getting his number 14 number from Anthony Mason. That did not happen. But we had some great memories here in Charlotte. Bobby, um, he had a kind of a turning point in his career when Paul Silas took him out of the starting lineup. And you kind of had the battle of the egos with Derek Coleman and Anthony Mason. And of course, being the type of guy Bobby is, he was like, I want to do whatever it takes to win. If it means coming off the bench, then I'm coming off the bench. So um, I know he was excited to play with Dale Curry because Dale had this incredible shot. I think Dale, just like his son, have the quickest release I've ever seen in my life.
No
It's like
question.
lightning. So he was kind of sad as soon as Bobby was traded. They traded Muggsy Bogue and Dale Curry, immediately. So he was sad to see them go. But I mean, I love the game of basketball. I played a little bit in high school. So I just love seeing my husband compete on the court day in and day out with such incredible teammates and talent. So I enjoyed it. I'm still in Charlotte if that means anything.
Oh yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it seems like you really fell in love with both the cities you lived in, with Cleveland and Charlotte, and I think that's what it's all about. Obviously it goes a lot beyond basketball. I mean, it's your personal life too, because your whole life revolves around the city you're living in. So that's a big deal.
That's true.
And what if you can go back and take a favorite moment from Cleveland and a favorite moment from Charlotte during Bobby's playing career? What would they be?
Um, Favorite moment from Cleveland is when he scored 43 points against the Utah
Yep,
Jazz.
I remember that.
And the first time he had his triple double, that was really special. Um, in Charlotte, I don't know. I was a little frustrated in Charlotte because I was mad when they took my man out the starting lineup. I would come to the games late because I knew my husband wasn't starting, and my husband was like, "Hey, I need you to get to the games on time." And he reminded me, like, it doesn't matter about starting. He was like, "I'm going for the six-man award." So my fondest memory, I would say, during the playoffs when he shaved his head bald. I couldn't believe he did that. So that was probably, some. I had some really good times in Charlotte, with him. So.
And when did you guys start having kids? Like, when were your kids born exactly?
So my son was born in 96. He was
Okay.
born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So when we were in Cleveland, we had my son. And when we were traded to Charlotte, I was actually pregnant with my daughter, Kirsty, and she was born in 1998. Unfortunately, my kids were only 1 and 3, when we lost Bobby. So, man, just just wish I could turn back the hands of time. Wish I could turn back the hands of time.
Kendall, I lost my best friend to suicide when I was 20 years old. So it was 18 years ago. And I'll never forget the moment I found out. I'll never forget it. I was in college and I was living with my mom at the time, and she got a call, and I knew someone, you could just tell by her demeanor, something bad happened, and she kind of started crying, and I looked at her and there's tears coming down her eyes. And I'll never forget when she told me what happened. It was just like, I think that moment, your whole world just shuts down. Like unless when you lose somebody that close to you, a brother, a husband, a wife, a best friend, it's something you'll never forget. That moment sticks with you forever. When you look back at that moment on January 12th, 2000, do you remember anything about that day, or is it kind of just blacked out in your memory at this point? Or what were the, raw emotions like back then?
I remember every detail of that day. It's etched in my mind for the rest of my life. A typical day. I woke up, took the kids to school. Bobby had shoot around. They were playing the Chicago Bulls that morning. Um, and usually we would meet at a breakfast place. Sometimes David Wesley and his fiance at the time, we would meet at the original Pancake House. So if we didn't meet there, I cooked pancakes. That was his ritual. He had pancakes before every game day for breakfast. And so I have to wait for the call, either meet me at the pancake house or cook the pancakes. And I remember calling him on the phone, no answer. I get a phone call from Shannon Wesley. She was like, I need you to come to my house. Me and David had a fight. And I'm like, y'all always fight. I'm not coming over there. I took my time because I was really kind of concerned. How come Bobby wasn't picking up the phone? And she called back a second time and she was like, Kendall, it's been an accident and I really need you to get to Tavola Road. She said it was bad. And so I literally stopped what I was doing and took off to Tavola Road, which is not even a half a mile down the street from the Coliseum, where they left shoot around. And so there was this voice, Brad, telling me to slow down. I just remember this, it was vivid. I was talking back to this voice. That's how surreal this voice was. And he was like, Bobby didn't make it, and I need you to slow down. And I remember driving up to the scene of the accident right behind the owner's car. I was like, man, the owner's out here? Like, it must be bad. And I could just remember Eldon Campbell, Anthony Mason crying, David Wesley distraught. And I'm like, Eddie Jones, like, to see grown men cry, I was like, this must be really bad. But I didn't see Bobby at the time. I didn't even see his car. I just saw a gentleman they were putting in the paramedics, and I run to the paramedics and I'm like, clearly it's not my husband. And I just turned, and in my peripheral, I can see his 911 Porsche covered with the tarp. And I could see like his arm hanging out in the driver's seat. And I lost it. There was nothing. Paul Silas, Jerry Eves tried to contain me, and nobody could hold me back. I ran directly to the car, removed the caution tape, took that white sheet off of his body. And Brad, I just couldn't believe that was the love of my life, lifeless in his car. I'm just like, this can't be how it's going to end for me. And I just remember praying with him, and I told him, I'm going to take care of the children. I'm going to take care of the kids. And I just remember God just giving me incredible strength to lift myself up and to plan his funeral. At the time he died, he was only one of 8 players that had a death clause in his contract. And so I knew how much money we had saved up. I've never used my college degree, Brad. I couldn't even mourn because I had this knot in my stomach, like how I'm gonna take care of these kids, like, you know, the finances. I remember he was on me about the finances. He would make me sit in the financial advisors meeting so I could learn more about the finances, not knowing it was preparing me for this day. And so when I talked to his agent, Mark Bartlestein, he said, Kendall, you're going to be okay. Don't worry about anything. Plan Bobby's funeral. Bobby had a death clause in his contract, and you're going to inherit the rest of his contract. And Brad, I just remember exhaling. Like that was just a heavy load that was just lifted up immediately. And I planned his funeral, and I was just obedient to whatever I felt led to do. I did it. And I planned his services. One was here in Charlotte. The other one was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And started a foundation in his honor. And that helped me grieve and deal with his death by keeping his legacy alive. I was able to talk about him, tell people about him, and, you know, show my children, you know, the legacy he left.
I mean, thank you for sharing that, by the way. And that the whole story is so, I can't even imagine what you went through, and especially the love of your life like that. I really can't. I just, I think a lot of people, I think that's almost impossible to imagine for a lot of people to experience something like that. In those coming weeks, months, and years, right after those first 2, 3, 4 years, what was the grieving process like for you? And I'm sure you went through the grieving stages, of course, of anger and then all the, what was that like, and how did you get through it?
Oh man. The first year was unbelievable. I spent so many nights reading condolence letters from players all over the NBA, fans. I went through thousands of emails. I cried, I laughed, I screamed. Um, I never wanted my children to see me weak, or I didn't want them to see me not strong. So I put on a brave front to raise my babies, you know, but I was hurt. It hurt so bad because he was the head of my household, and he was a role model to so many people. He was an inspiration. He was so smart. To lose him, to, you know, I lost my husband, my kids lost their father, you know, his parents lost a son, his brother lost his brother. Um, it was devastating. It was devastating. So the healing process was long. It took a long time to heal. I kept all of his things exactly how he left it for about a year. Didn't touch it. Um, and stayed in the house for over 10 years before I was able to get the courage to sell it and let go, because I had to. Life goes on. Life goes on for everybody else. And I had to put the pieces back together.
I mean, that again, like I think when you look at the grieving process and you look at what you had to go, the first couple of years to me, something like that, you're just trying to survive, like you said, every day. It's not even, you're trying to, especially when you're raising kids. I can't imagine that. So you have to put on that, like you said, the brave face in front of them. Then behind the scenes, you're just going through all the emotions and trying to survive. And then you get to a point, I think, where it gets a little, for people listening who've never gone through a major loss like that, it gets a little bit easier, but you always have that void. You always have that, it never goes away. It doesn't magically disappear. It's always kind of there, but you learn how to live with it to a degree. And how would you describe that for you? Like, how did you learn how to, not get over Bobby, but how did you learn how to live with that void of him not being there?
You know, my faith in God at the time, and even now, um, was my source for my strength. I would not be talking to you today if it wasn't for God. Um, you know, people say that, you know, all the time, God is good. But when I say God is good, Brad, I know what he did for me. He took this little country girl from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and I did some extraordinary things and things that I didn't even think that I could do, starting his foundation in his honor and in his memory. You know, if you ask me while I was married, would I would be running board meetings and doing all these things, I would say no. I was trying to spend that money, Brad. But God had different plans for me, and He has kept me, and even to this day, with raising my children, God has kept us afloat and has never left us. You know, when the word says that, you know, God would be a father to the fatherless, He did just that for my children. You know, was my husband in the absence of my husband, I had to depend on God to help me make a lot of major decisions in my life. And so, you know, my faith leads me in many different ways.
And how has your perspective on life changed since that day?
Oh, wow. I don't take life for granted. I don't take life for granted at all. I always encourage my friends that are married, don't sweat the small stuff. When we get mad, you know, with our loved ones over silly stuff, you know, don't talk for 3 days, and, you know, for what? Don't sweat the small stuff, because tomorrow is not promised. Today is not promised, you
Mhm.
know. So you love in a different way. Um, I let my children know each and every day that I love them. That's how we end our conversations. Trey, mama loves you. Kirsty, I love you. So that they'll know without, you know, a shadow of a doubt, they were loved.
It's so true. And I think the gratitude and appreciating every day you're alive. I was never like that until I lost Bobby. And I kind of, I was 20 then. So I was in college and didn't fully, you're kind of naive at that age, but it really kind of matured me pretty quickly because I realized like my best friend's no longer here. I'm never going to see him again, at least in this lifetime. And it was like, for me,
Wow.
it hits you pretty quickly, and you're like, wow, I got to really, I think I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today with everything I'm doing if it wasn't for that moment, because it kind of changed how I live my life and how I went after the goals and dreams. Where before then, I don't know what I would have done. I mean, it sounds silly, but if he was still here, I don't know, because his, the losing him, we were like brothers, was like, I mean, it just changed everything. My perspective changed immediately, Kendall, and that's why I can't relate as far as the love, of course, because you guys had a deeper bond as far as the being in love, but I can relate as far as losing that person that is you grow up with almost, and you have all these memories with, and you do
Right.
everything with, and then not have them there anymore. It's a very weird experience. I mean, if especially when they're young.
Yeah, I was gonna say, being so young,
And Bobby was
Bobby
30.
died at 30, and to process death at 20 for you, 28 for me, it hits different. And your peers don't understand, because if they haven't experienced that loss of a loved one that close, they can't comprehend.
No. Nope.
They can only, they try to empathize with you, but it's not the same.
No.
And so I had girlfriends that didn't know how to help me during this grieving process. But when they lost a loved one, they revisit, and just like, Kendall, I have to give you a hug. I had no idea how heavy grief was. And they wish they could have been there for me, but they didn't know how.
Mm.
So,
That
you
what
know,
Kendall, what you just said is so true. Like I had friends back then who they wanted to be there for me, and they tried, but they just didn't know what to do or say. And what do you say to somebody? Especially my guy
right.
friends, they just didn't. They say I'm sorry, and that's it. But as we gotten older and they've gone through their own stuff and losing people or whatever they might have gone through, I have people turn to me now because I know I've been through some of that stuff when I was younger. And it's kind of, you kind of feel like it's almost your, it becomes almost not a superpower, but you feel good about helping people because you've been through it before and you want to help them because you know how horrible it is to be in that spot.
Right. That's so true.
So what you said, and it really, and I think another thing I want to touch on real quick is when you talked about how you don't sweat the small things, especially in relationships and every other. My grandma, before she passed away about 6 years ago, I asked her probably a year before she passed away. I said, Grandma, if you could tell me one thing about life, one key piece of wisdom, what would you tell me? And she looked at me and she goes, Bradley. She called me Bradley. She goes, don't sweat the small stuff. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. And it's such a simple thing to, we take it for granted, but it really is one of the keys to life.
It is. Because nowadays we have big things to worry about.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Everything that's going on in the world today, this new generation, just like, things are just so crazy. Like, we have bigger problems to worry about. So never, never sweat the small things in life.
No, it's
That's
so
great
true.
information your grandmother gave you.
She was a wise woman. I miss her every day. But when you look back now at that, so obviously you start the foundation and you kind of start picking up the pieces a little bit. Talk a little bit about the foundation, number one, and what else. Talk about your kids growing up and what they've been doing.
So when Bobby passed away, I started the Bobby Phills Scholarship Fund, and I gave need-based scholarships to deserving student athletes and in the Mecklenburg County where I stay. And I did that for like 4 or 5 years, Brad. And I did a huge celebrity dinner and silent auction each and every year. And my first annual, I had Michael Jordan. The second year, I had Chris Webber. Oh my God, Steve Francis. It was star-studded events. And that was my focus each and every day because that was a part of my healing process. It kept me sane. I had something to work on to distract me from, my reality. But that time I was spending into, cultivate new relationships, to fundraise and do things like that, I was taken away from my children. And so one day I heard my son tell the nanny, "Shut up." And I almost killed Trey Fields. And that was the day I kind of stepped away from the scholarship fund. And I took a break for a long time to raise my children and, introduced them to basketball at a young, early age. And so I became super mom. I had to put that cape on each and every day because not only was my son an athlete, but so was my daughter. She probably should have been my boy. Now that I think about it, but they both were incredible athletes. So I was, honored to be there for both of them, but it was hard, a hard juggling act. And just recently, when the pandemic started, I was going to visit a family that I adopted. This family has been in my life for over 20 years. And I remember it raining, storming. And I go down College Drive here in Charlotte and I see all these tents set up. And I'm like, almost wrecked. Like, wait a minute, it's people in these tents. So the homeless shelters became overcrowded because of COVID. They had to put them out basically. And they lived in tents. It was over 250 people living in these tents with the most horrid conditions you could imagine. And I was like, you know what? It's time um, to bring my foundation back. And I didn't want to be a professional widow. I didn't want to, people to just remember me as Bobby Phills widow. I wanted to be Kendall Phills. And so I started my foundation again, and it's the Phills Foundation. And now I'm doing things that holds near and dear to my heart, which is the homeless community. Before, Bobby was a student athlete and academics was his priority. So I gave scholarships to need-based kids. But this is more me, what I'm passionate about. And so that's what I'm doing now, trying to figure out a way that I could put these cute little cottages for some deserving homeless people here in the city of Charlotte. And giving back is one of the most rewarding things that I could ever do in life. And I made a promise to God, as long as I'm blessed financially, I will always give back. And, I haven't reneged on that promise.
I love that. I love everything about that. And I guess when you talk about doing something for you to what you're passionate about, and obviously you want to carry on Bobby's legacy as far as what he did, but I think it's important to have your own legacy too, like you were saying, and do what you're passionate about as well, because you're your own individual person. Even though, yes, you're Bobby Phills' widow, but you're Kendall
Exactly.
Phills. So I think that's very important.
Thank you, Brad.
Mhm.
Thank you.
And I know, and just like some people in my life, I see how they, you might be caught up in you're either married to somebody for a while and you become their wife or their husband, whatever. But you still got to have your own individual life and your own individual interests. And I think, especially with you now, having done all this and having been through what you've been through, it's probably, I mean, you seem to me like you're very well-rounded. And just talking to you for the last 45 minutes, I mean, I can tell that you can tell people who've been through something in their lives. You can just tell right away, opposed to people who really haven't been through as much. I could tell, especially with loss, with major grief, I could usually tell right away, Kendall. I think the kind of people that have been through it, it's something that you kind of pick up on. So,
Wow.
at this point in your life, what do you foresee in the next, 5, 10, 15 years? What do you want to do? And do you ever think about, if Bobby was still here, what do you think you would have been doing at this point with Bobby?
Man, Brad. Oh, that's a good question. Um, right before he passed away, I was actually praying for my purpose in life because I saw my husband doing something he loved to do. And I remember him telling me, Kendall, I'm blessed. He was like, I make a lot of money to do something I love to do. And I knew one day my kids were going to grow up and I was no longer gonna have to be a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't know what that was going to be. So one day somebody asked my daughter what she wanted to do when she grew up, and she was like, I want to be just like my mama because all she do is talk on the phone all day long. And I thought, whoa, mind you, I was running the foundation, but all she saw was her mama talking on the phone. And so in 2012, I got my real estate license. And I became a real estate agent because I pretty much was a real estate agent before I even became an agent, because all the new players that would come in town, people would be like, call Kendall. Kendall's still in Charlotte. Y'all, Kendall's still in Charlotte. And I'm showing these guys $1 million houses, they moving next door to my house. I'm like, wait a minute, light bulb. So I became a real estate agent and that became my niche. I work with the professional athletes. I still work with them to this day on the buying and selling side. So that has been, a very cool experience because I love, beautiful homes. And more importantly, I love to help athletes because a lot of these guys, they graduating, they one and done. And, some of them, they don't have their parents or father figures in their lives. And so they can easily be taken advantage of. And, real estate is a huge purchase and you have to make the right purchase in real estate. And so I like to use, the things that I've learned over the years and, my business savviness to let them know, hey, this is what you want to consider when you make this purchase, especially if it's going to be like a multi-million-dollar home. I don't want you to buy a home that you're going to be stuck with when you get traded,
Yep.
So I just love it. And I've met some very cool people over the years. And so, yeah, so now my kids get to see mom, with this career and not just talking on the phone all day.
And when you say you work with athletes, you work with athletes just coming to Charlotte or athletes in general, like anywhere they're moving?
Just in Charlotte, I have friends all over. I'll refer them if they go out of state. But I've helped Randy Moss find his
Really?
dream home here in Charlotte, North
No
Carolina.
kidding.
Yes. Oh my God. Tyrus Thomas.
Wow.
A lot of guys, and I've even helped Michael Jordan's daughter and his ex-wife Juanita Jordan. So
Wow.
yeah, it's been fun. I'm working with a Panther player right now to find something. So I absolutely love it. So that's my travel money. Because I love to travel.
That is awesome though. What an awesome niche to fall into as well. Because I mean, obviously you have that experience of traveling or go moving to different cities. And then, like you said, you already referring people anyways, and people are always asking you. So, I mean, it's the perfect niche for you. And then the athletes, you were, married to one. So the whole thing makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I know what they like.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, you got to speak their language. You got again at that level, especially like I wouldn't know what someone likes at a couple $1 million house. I would have no idea what I'm looking at, so that's a big deal.
Thank you.
Very cool. And what about your kids now? What are they up to these days? And I know they both play. Didn't your daughter play college basketball? Or am I wrong on that?
She did.
That's
She
what I
did.
thought.
She did. My son played for Yale University. Um, and my daughter ended up following him her freshman year to Wagner College in Staten Island. She decided she didn't like Staten Island. She transferred to FGCU in Fort Myers, Florida. And man, these kids are incredible. They both have championship rings
Wow.
from their conference. Yeah, they both got a chance to go to the NCAA tournament.
No kidding.
So it's been incredible. My daughter actually, she opted out of her 5th year of eligibility, and she opted back in because they gave the student athletes, they gave them an additional year due to COVID. So she just jumped back in, and my son and I were able to see her compete this year. And they actually, they beat Virginia Tech, but they lost to the University of Maryland. So she actually went out with a bang with her college career. She doesn't want to continue her career. She actually wants to be a physician's assistant. And my son had his first professional contract in Denmark last year. tore his Achilles.
Oh,
And so he's here rehabbing. But the best thing I could do for that boy, he has a Yale degree and he started an app called Jimble. So I have my own AAU team. We could never find gyms to rent. So his app will not only let you find gyms to rent, but it's going to link the community with athletics and fitness. So it's a really cool app. It's called Jimble. I am 100% invested in this app.
and where do we go? And is it out yet? Is it, is it like a prototype or is it fully accessible?
You can download the app now. And I think next month it's going to be fully functioning and working.
No
So
kidding. Okay. So
yeah, it's Jimble.
Jumble.
Gymble, Jimble.
Okay. Gotcha. I'm going to definitely check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool.
And
you can find him on Instagram too, and it will tell you exactly how the app is going to work.
okay. I'm going to check it out after this. That's really cool.
And then he's kind of TikTok famous. The kid is famous on TikTok as well. So T Phills with 2 S at the end. Look him up because he does some very inspirational videos. And growing up, when my kids were growing up, they did not want to see videos of their father, and I found that very interesting. If I pulled out a tribute tape of their dad, they got very emotional, and it was like, we don't want to see it. They would just cry and just bawl. And so it's like, man, why? If I were them and I didn't know my dad, I would be asking all kind of questions. They never asked me any questions about their dad ever. And so the older Trey got, it took him graduating from college. TikTok became famous. I mean, he did a video on TikTok, it went viral, but then he started telling his story and he started talking about his father. And I just remember my heart just melting because for the first time, I heard him speak on his father and from his perspective and just how all his life he was trying to fill his dad's shoes in so many different ways. And to be honest, he's kind of surpassed his father.
That's amazing. You sharing that story. And I have nephews on TikTok all the time. I got to get on there. I have an account, but I don't go on much. My nephews are always like, Uncle Brad, you got to get on TikTok. You got to get on TikTok. I'm going to check this out for sure. I'm going to tell my nephews about it too. And, so sharing his story, I'm sure it's therapeutic for him, even though I know he was really young when he passed away, but just not really knowing who you're, not getting to know Bobby like you did. It's got to be at this point of his life. I'm sure there's a lot of questions coming up and a lot of things in his mind, wondering about him because he is at the age now where he's becoming a man, and it's very different than when he was probably.
And they can Google everything now. So
yep, exactly.
They Google their dads, and I pretty much my whole life is documented with videos and photographs. And a couple of years ago, I had all my VHS tapes converted into DVDs. And so my kids got to see their last Christmas with their father. They spent a lot of time looking at those DVDs as adults. And so, now they know the laugh, they know his voice, and that makes me happy, Brad.
Yeah, that's got to. And that's great to get to see that and get to have those memories. And Kendall, I have a few more questions for you. And this one is one I think a lot of people would like to hear. If anybody who just lost someone close to them recently, what would be the advice you would give to them as far as the grieving process and how you got through it?
So Bobby had a dear friend. His name is Kerry Mitchell. Kerry Mitchell designed suits for the NBA players. And he recently passed away 2 weeks ago. And I was very good friends with his wife, Vanessa. And I'm going to call her because I wanted to just kind of give her time to just kind of process everything. But what I really want to let her know is that I want her to have a support system. You need a support system to help you tarry through day to day and find a tribe that's going to pick you up on those days that you don't want to be bothered and that you can't pick yourself up. Spirituality is very important to me. So, I'm a believer, a Christian, but, whatever your beliefs are, the higher being, whoever you call your God, I 100% put all my faith in my God, and that helped me. My steps have been ordered ever since. Um, and I also want to encourage you. People think that you have to be wealthy to get your house in order with wills and with estate planning and even with insurance policies. It doesn't matter if you're worth $100,000, $50,000, $20 million. Put these insurance policies in place. And my husband and I, we did our wills a month and a half before he passed away. A month and a half before he passed away. Something you don't want to do because you don't think you're going to die. And so we're sitting at a long conference table, and everybody, I'm a little spicy, Brad. Everybody who knows I could be a little spicy. And I told my husband, if I die first, you bet not have no woman in my house. I'm gonna come back and hunt both of y'all. And I remember him telling me, well, that's not fair, because if anything happens to me, I would want you to remarry and to move on. So we had to make these uncomfortable decisions, what would happen to the children if both of us passed away. And so we had insurance policies put in place in addition to the NBA insurance policies, life insurance policy that they had. And that was the best thing my husband, could have done. And I remember Malik Sealy died 4 months after Bobby.
Yep.
And the only insurance policy she inherited was the $200,000 policy that the NBA, the National Basketball Association, had, was $200,000. I think today, because of Malik's death, it has gone up to probably, I think it's $1 million maybe. So just get your house in order now, because if you look at the world events and what's going on now, Brad, it's scary. Mm-hmm. Here today, gone today. With COVID, I don't know if you lost loved ones, due to COVID, but I know a lot of people that has passed away. And so get your house in order.
No
Get
question.
your house in order, get a wonderful support system and your faith in God.
I love it.
And find your purpose in life. Live a purpose-filled life.
I love that. Those are such foundational elements, I think, and I especially the connection aspect you talked about as your the support group. That is something you don't really think about and don't even realize until it happens, where you're like, there's days you're like, I need to talk to somebody. I need to have my friend here. I need to have my whoever it was at the time, and it really, I remember we went to his parents' house every night, I think for like a month. We just sat in their front steps, and his sisters were there, and we would just, cry, laugh, whatever it would be. And they, for them, we shared stories with them, probably some he wouldn't want us to share, but all the story, but they wanted to hear it, and we were laughing. And it was one of those things where I'll never forget. It's an odd thing because you're devastated and it's like an awful time, but yet you're also sharing memories. Like you said, you're kind of laughing at times. It's a very bizarre experience. And,
right.
It's like one day you're miserable and everything. And the next day you're kind of laughing about some funny memory, or you're smiling because of a memory. And it's just up and down. But I think what you talked about there, especially the support group aspect of it. And for me back then, really being around my other friends and his family helped me immensely. And we went to like suicide support groups, survivors of suicide and all that. So I think for anybody listening, as far as the grieving process, everything Kendall says is 100%. It's such foundational elements that you don't realize how powerful they are until you go through it. And then you have to fall back on those things.
That's true. So true.
So, okay, one more question. I ask this to everybody, and I love hearing these answers. And I'm going to ask this in two ways because of Bobby's passing. So here's the question. Number one is, when you look back 20, 30 years from now, your grandkids are around and you're telling them about your life, what do you want them to know about the legacy of Kendall Phills and Bobby Phills?
Wow. The legacy of their grandfather, Mm-hmm. I would want them to know that Bobby was an amazing guy. He was wise beyond his years. He was very intelligent. He had a heart and a love for people. He was more than just an athlete. I mean, he was a community leader, a family man, and he was a great friend. And he was very competitive. He had a competitive spirit, and he was very smart. He took his academics. He didn't play with his academics, and he was able to balance his athletics with his academics. And those are some of the things I want to instill in them. You know, I had a thing where I would tell my children, the Phills kids are overachievers. And that's really because their dad was an overachiever. I didn't let them know I wasn't until they graduated from high school. And the legacy I want my grandkids to remember about their KK. She had a huge heart, and she lived to give. I'm a huge giver. I'm a huge believer and a lover of life, a lover of life. So, that's pretty much what I want them to remember me by.
Two wonderful legacies, really is. And Kendall, again, I want to thank you for coming on the show and taking the time to do this. And I remember we connected back, I think it was last September. I posted a picture of Bobby and you commented, and I didn't realize who you were at first. And I saw it. I'm like, oh my God, it's Bobby's widow. So I reached out to you right away, and I really appreciate you doing this. And it's almost, sometimes I don't know if I believe in fate or not, but it's weird because it's like, this is you're one of the people of all the different athletes I could have interviewed. Bobby was someone I always thought about after he passed away, and to be able to interview you means a lot to me for multiple reasons. And obviously not just the Cleveland connection, but just because I loved him as a player and he just seemed like such a great guy. So to hear the stories behind the scenes and then to hear your life and how you met and your children, it's really been amazing. It really has. And I really thank you for coming on.
Well, I have enjoyed every second. I want to thank you for your Instagram, because a lot of time the new players, they forget about the OGs, as they call them, the old school players. And, thanks for keeping their legacy, relevant. And till this day, I still, I feel, I can't even put into words how I feel when people come up to me to let me know they remembered my late husband. It's the best feeling because they haven't forgotten him. And that means everything to me.
That's got to. That's awesome. And I don't think his legacy in Cleveland, again, is set for, we'll always remember Bobby. He'll always be a part of Cleveland sports and the cult, what he meant for the city back then. And Cleveland's the kind of city that embraces their athletes. And if they love you, they'll love you forever. And Bobby's one of those guys that people have never forgotten. I remember the day we found out, Kendall, everyone was devastated here. I mean, it was like we lost our own. It wasn't just a random guy in Charlotte. This was one of our guys that we grew up. We're the one that raised him in our eyes. And it was like, that was devastating for all of us. I'll never forget that as long as I live, and nobody here will forget it either. So again, Bobby's legacy will live on forever. And we really appreciate, everything that he did and you did, in the city of Cleveland. And of course, now what you're doing now for everybody. And I think it's amazing what you've done and what you've overcome. I mean, really is incredible.
Oh, thank you so much.
Of course. And again, you welcome on anytime, Kendall. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this.
Oh, love you, Brad.
I love you too, Kendall. So, thank you. And again, anytime you'll reach out, I got your cell number, but it's just been really cool connecting with you. It really has been. And I almost feel like this is fate. It's weird. Maybe it's two Bobbies, because my best friend was named Bobby too. So maybe it's both.
I heard you say that. So I was like, well, maybe his name was Bobby too.
Yep, it was.
That's special. Very special.
It is very special. Yep. So thank you again for coming on, and I'll let you know when this airs. And again, I appreciate your time so much.
Oh, no problem. And don't forget to let me know, because I'll be all over the place, Brad.
Oh, I'll definitely let you know. All right. Thanks, Kendall.
No problem. Have a good one.
You too. All right.